All right, hey y'all, it's another Friday with the Louisville Community Bail Fund. I am Jessica. I am a member of the support team with LCBF. Let's kick it to Rebecca.
Hey y'all, I'm Rebecca, she, her. I am a member of the data management team and the court watching team with Louisville Community Bail Fund. And I will kick it over to Kanisha.
I am a member of the support team with LCBF, and we're going to throw it to Ebony.
My name is Ebony Murray. I was released from Louisville Metro Department of Corrections September 2019. I'm fighting the case right now, and I plan to win.
Hey, I'm Robin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an organizer in Kentucky with the Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons.
Okay, so we got a lot of things to talk about today. We're not going to hold y'all too long. First up, we want to talk about what is happening with the Capitol. You know, a lot of people stormed the Capitol, those treasonous white groups that just decided that they wanted to interrupt a democratic process. So we want to talk about what their bonds and treatment are looking like. There's a lot of internal fighting and internal conflict between state and federal agencies on how to charge people and who to charge. We're seeing a lot of differences between the conversation and internal conflict on charging the treasonous participants as opposed to the people who were participating in protests this past summer. So what do y'all think about it? Ebony, I'd love to hear from you about that. No pressure.
Well, when everything I was locked up when Breonna Taylor, when everything happened, I was arrested back September 2019 for assault too. It's self-defense on my behalf. All my evidence and stuff is there. The whole situation, me watching in jail, is scary. There, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going on. And it's just like history. You're watching it. And I'm like, I'm in her. I could be out there helping. I could be doing something. I could be making the calls. I could be doing anything to make, I have a voice. I want to be heard. But people like me, I have a family who doesn't, they're not going to, you do something bad, okay, you take care, you do what you do. My family is really, they're there for me. They're always going to be there for me. But if you do something wrong, you face the consequences, and then it's that. I don't understand how, hold on, guys. It's crazy because I spent 8 months in Louisville Metro Department of Corrections on assault too. And I found my voice in there because I was alone. My family was there, but they didn't understand what was going on. It's a lot of sneaky secrets and stuff that's going on behind closed doors that I don't know about. So when I got that opportunity, when my public defender came in, I had a public defender, and she did not reach out to me the whole 8 months I was there. Like, she would put it on hold, and I had my family calling, reaching out to her and trying to get her. And she was like, put me on the back burner. I don't want to say her name because I don't want to, but at the same time, I felt like I was just not I don't know. It was just really weird. It's scary watching this stuff from inside and not having nobody and trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Who's going to be there for me? Shoot, then the history of all this stuff going on it's real scary. I'm happy that I had the opportunity. Black Lives Matter paid my $50,000 bond. And that's a lot of money. $50,000 I was in there for 8 months. Never got deducted, never got checked. Kept pushing up in the coronavirus. Oh, wow. So as 4 months sitting there waiting on a court date, I got 2 children. My oldest son has autism. And I want to be a part of their life. I want to be a part of everything. But it's a lot of sneaky stuff that y'all don't know that's going on in these jails and stuff. I tell it though.
Right. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, you were held for 8 months before you were able to even connect with your public defender. But we're seeing the people who stormed the Capitol being processed much, much quicker. And even with federal agencies being involved, even with them having stormed a federal building. And it's not
I
so
believe I
much
would have
that
died.
they breached security. Mhm. Oh,
I would have been
absolutely.
dead.
And it's
Like,
not so much
seriously.
that anybody else would. It's not so much that they stormed the federal building, it's what they did while they were in there because protests have taken place at the federal building. So the Capitol Police isn't, you know, they're not strangers to that process. They're not strangers to trying to understand why people might attempt to occupy that space. But people were defecating inside of the Capitol. They were smearing it on the walls. They were stealing electronics and mail. They had zip ties, and an overwhelming majority, well, I won't say an overwhelming majority, but more people than the general public should have been comfortable with were previous or current military or police force people. And Rebecca and Kanisha, I know that you all were in Louisville, during the summer uprisings, and you probably watched what happened in the Capitol while they were attempting to, overturn that process. What are some of the differences you saw between how protesters were treated who were protesting Breonna and all of the other murders that we've seen in Louisville and nationally, and how they're treating these white men primarily in regards to storming the Capitol? What are some differences that you saw?
So I know for me personally, I took my daughter, actually both my daughters, we all went downtown to protest. And my oldest daughter is, she's special. So she was basically cornered by a bunch of sheriffs and would not bow down. And it was when there were sheriffs. We were right by the courthouse. It was sheriffs and um National Reserve down there. And the reserves was like, we're not really about to do nothing to you. We just need you to leave. And she was so adamant, like she like sat down and would not budge and basically decided to just move further past the point they said we could go to. And my 15-year-old, I had to watch my 15-year-old be hogtied and taken into the old county jail by a bunch of grown men, put in some room, no females around her. And we just got a letter about a month ago that she has to now report to a court designated worker. And she's looking at me and I said, we ain't reporting to nobody. We will take this to court. We're not reporting to this. So then we see that, and then we see what happens at the Capitol. And she was the first one that was like, they didn't treat me like that. And I was a 15-year-old, but they let them all just get away. It's like, hey, that's Kentucky for you. So it's been like every ounce of a discussion I want to have with them when school stuff happens, they learning all that stuff in real world. And it has like truly, truly like made an impact on this young lady's life that she's never going to forget. A group of grown men hogtied her and took her in the old county jail. No parent. We don't even, she couldn't even describe where she was. She just said she was in a room with some bars. And I will never, yeah. And of course, we're supposed to go to the court designated worker. And I told her, you're not having access to my child. We're not doing nothing that you ask of us. We will see you in court. Ain't heard from him since.
Yeah, I think that's like a really prime example of your daughter is the only minor that has been arrested in the uprisings of 2020 here in Louisville, and most of them are treated in that same sort of harsh manner of being tossed around and thrown around by grown humans who have no business tossing around young children at 15 years old, right? And I think, Ebony, you had a $50,000 bond, right? These folks that participated in this uprising or in this Capitol breach and all that, the on the scene is 25,000, and a human died in the process of all of these felonies being committed, and that should be sort of felony murder, and that's not being put around, and all these folks are being released and they're not getting these bonds. And I think that is like another prime example of, someone wrote in here, it's white privilege at its finest, that these folks are getting in these courtrooms and their whiteness is leading the way, and they're not getting bonds and they're not getting charges. And so it's not just that treatment on the ground, it's what's happened afterwards and in these courtrooms. And in these courtrooms that are, DC, they're in the DC District Court, and DC is not a state. So those are, not mistaken, automatically federal charges. It's federal land, and those judges are appointed essentially by Trump, or they're like, they're in a space that. Yes, honey. Sorry, I have a child. So it's these Trump appointed judges are making these decisions to allow these white supremacists to get out and to not face these charges, to not have high bonds. I saw one bond of 25,000, and that is the most that I have seen. And many of them have just been let free, ROR'd. And what we saw here in Louisville was $10,000 bonds for protest-related charges over the summer. I mean, it's pretty clear the discrepancies in the data of what's happening.
Even after the legal effects, the legal repercussions, which are obviously, really small compared to what any of us would get if we were to try to storm the Capitol. These folks that are getting released are going home and are probably going to live relatively safe lives after that. Whereas, if any of you were to storm the Capitol maskless and have your identity so exposed, you would obviously be in great danger no matter where you were after that point. And the fact that they didn't even bother concealing their identity for the most part, at the one point in history where that would have been legally acceptable to do in the Capitol building, shows that they didn't have any fear of that.
I think it's also interesting to note their treatment when they're serving out these warrants, they're arresting people. Breonna Taylor died because they were serving a no-knock warrant and still has not received justice. The walls of the building that she resided in have received more justice than she has by the city of Louisville. But in the same vein, they are accommodating dietary requests. Never mind that there are prisoners globally who are on hunger strikes and are trying to call attention to the conditions of the jails and the prisons that they are in. They use it as a form of torture for some Muslim prisoners, where they will only serve them pork-based products and they're not mindful of their needs. So we're not seeing that mindfulness be duplicated when Black and brown people are involved. Instead, it seems that they're just escalating any type of trauma that they've already put on us, being inside of the system. So the differences are, they're plain. It's also interesting for me to see that the feds and the states are going back and forth on who to charge and how, and saying that there are too many people for them to charge and that it would overwhelm the court systems, when that is what practiced and principal organizers have been saying since the beginning of COVID. No one should be in jail during COVID, and you're relying on prison labor for people to mass produce hand sanitizer and masks, but not have access to those resources. And we're saying that there are too many people in the jails and in the prisons during COVID, and that it's causing a mass outbreak and a super spreader event. And that's being completely ignored. But when white people are involved, all of a sudden, 800 is too much to bring charges against. And then the last thing for me was seeing that that member of the Proud Boys was an FBI informant. So y'all don't even have your own people, you know, under wraps. And there's little to no restrictions again when you operate or there's proximity to white privilege and you're working with the feds, you're still allowed to be a domestic terrorist and to continue to actually incite riots instead of attempting to assert your rights. But that's not something that they view as a threat. And that's why all that shit popped off. So,
that goes for the politicians too.
I just want to touch on. Yes, politicians for sure. And you mentioned slave labor by using prison labor. Well, the folks that have to rebuild what happened in the Capitol, all the furniture that's being rebuilt, all of that is being built with prison labor. It's being built by currently incarcerated folks. So, I mean, like, just the depths of that. We are a country that relies on slave labor to continue to rebuild the mistakes and the destruction of white supremacists and their whatever they're doing out there. They you know. And another thing I think is really important, you mentioned the proud FBI informant. You know, so many of these white supremacist groups, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, a lot of their roots are being ex-law enforcement, being ex-military, that these people are radicalized by the state in state programs with our tax money, right? Like, we are radicalizing these people ourselves and we don't even realize it. And I think that's important in what happened and what's really coming out. And one last thing, I'm sorry, I could go on about this for hours, is when we talk about the surveillance and the social media and what is being used in these court documents and what these judges are determining is admissible or inadmissible, like, all of that will have ramifications when they charge Black Lives Matter protesters. And suddenly our direct messages become admissible in court, and suddenly our social media becomes monitored in a deeper way and is admissible in court, and this, that, and the other. So what is happening is setting a precedent of what will ultimately be used against us in the future.
That's a conversation that I had frequently with people, because you saw people who were eager to assist the FBI ahead of MLK's birthday and the federal holiday. They were eager to become informal informants for this federal agency who has access to a vast amount of resources and can really, I mean, truthfully, all they had to do was call up their cousin and be like, "Hey, Frank, you passed me on your way in. What was you doing in there? Those are y'all's family members. So why do you need the public's help?" And the ways that we engage punishment in this country have to be revolutionized, because anything that we think is going to be a logical consequence for people who commit what our understanding of crime is ultimately going to use to hurt and to perpetuate harm against Black and brown people. Them white folks ain't, one, they're not going to jail. Two, if they go to jail, they're not going to stay there because they have the resources to beat the system. The state counts on poor Black and brown people not to be able to utilize the resources that they have, either as individuals or as a community, in order to beat the system. But the white folks got the cheat code. So next, we want to talk about the LPD report that came out yesterday. It was a heavy hitter. I'm still looking through it myself. Rebecca, I know that you got a chance to look at it. So can you give us just a couple of pointers that you saw and things we should be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. And I, one, apologize for my children that will be loud behind me. They know that I'm live. I've only gotten to dive in a little bit to it, just like everybody else, because it is a thick, thick document. But when we look at sort of what the conclusions that they made, one, it's all things that we are, as the community, have been saying for many, many years and have been pointing out, and now they're saying the data is there for it. And the data basically is showing that Black folks in Louisville, all across Louisville, but also in certain neighborhoods, are being disproportionately stopped and arrested and charged. They are claiming that once someone is under arrest, that race is no longer a matter with use of force. But I have a lot of questions about how we skewed that data to get to that point, because I think, how do you all of a sudden forget that race is part of it if race is a part of every point to that point, right? Like, how does it suddenly disappear from the equation? But also sort of the recommendations that they were making. They are, once you get into what they are asking LMPD to do, like in the very minute details, the community disappears. The community input disappears, and it disappears in the training that they are asking them to implement is created by police, is created in an environment that was only police, that had absolutely no community input into what this training even looked like. It also asks, this training is very heavy on kind of a core principle of what a reasonable officer would do in a situation, or what a good officer would do in a situation. But what this document and report also showed was that LMPD has a really big issue right now with communication and implementation of policy and leadership. And how can you have a core of principled if you don't have any of those things? So we're not fixing the root problem, we're only putting a Band-Aid on it with this training. And that's sort of one of the things I think we should look at, and where the community is pulled out of what is implemented. And some of it too is, the really minute details of, they say regular check-ins. Well, what is regular? Is that once a year? Is that once a decade? Is that once a week? Sort of those things of what actually does this mean? Because they use a lot of fluff language. And then the last thing I think everybody has to look at is who who this company even is that did this report, and who these companies are that they're asking us to implement the trainings from. And all of these companies are based on very heavy in ex-police, in ex-top police, think too, like, people that are really deep into what is happening. And so that, when we're talking about reforming, which I don't think we can actually even do based on this report, but when we're talking about reforming, we have to talk about who is making the decisions of these reforms, and the foundation of that. And right now, what is presented, the foundation of that is heavy in police and militarized police. There's a lot of crossover in what Hillard Heinz does with like the Department of Justice and Homeland Security and police and all of that stuff, and anti-terrorism surveillance. And how does that kind of come in play? And I have to attend to this child that's yelling. I apologize.
All good, Rebecca. We're all holding many hats, and that's something that, maybe Kanisha can talk about later when she talks about how to engage LCBF. We're not neglecting the rest of our responsibilities to do this work. So as we're working in abolition, and as we're studying abolition and getting folks free, we are still tending to our families and our own needs. So Rebecca, do what you need to. We're going to hear from Robin next from Fight Toxic Prisons on some of the initiatives that they are working on, and some of the work that they've got coming up as well.
Thanks. Actually, this kind of comes out of what Rebecca was saying, and a couple of the comments that people were posting. Someone's mentioning that, like, everyone's oppressed, including white people are poor. And while, yes, white people can be poor, we're not going to be systemically poor like Black and brown people are. But at the same time, that kind of difference is weaponized, in these ways that we can get people to report to the FBI and be these informal informants, because white people feel that they have some sort of say, when really at the end of the day, you're still being used by the same systems. You just benefit a little bit more from it than Black and brown people. you're just stepping on someone else so that you don't have to be at the bottom. So that's the irony in how easy it is for them to sway white people into doing their work for them. And I just had to mention that because I find it kind of infuriating that they can do that so easily. But some of the things that we've got going on at Fight Toxic Prisons right now, it's a lot, so excuse my list I have to go through. But the whole team's working on a lot of really exciting work, so that's been great. On February 1st, Nation Inside is hosting a caravan to Washington, D.C., so it'll be interesting to see how that's received and if we can actually get any face-to-face meetings with people. But this is a call for a national day of action, including decentralized actions wherever folks are, even if they can't go on the caravan. And we're calling for mass clemency in light of COVID. And that's being tied into some of our other work. We have, I believe, 6 or 7 states now where we're conducting COVID research inside of prisons and jails so that we can actually have incarcerated people's direct words about how they're being affected and gather some statistics on how many cases there actually are, because we really can't trust the state to report on itself. So even though the Kentucky, BOP website, for instance, has COVID numbers for cases for staff and inmates, we are getting letters telling us directly from the inmates that those are not accurate, that there are a lot more cases, that they're refusing to test people because they don't want the cases to go up, and that they're putting COVID negative people in cells with COVID positive people and just leaving them there and not dealing with it. So that's a big part of our work right now, is trying to gather those stories and compile that information so that we can have a national study, and hopefully keep something like this from ever spreading this far again, especially to people that have absolutely no say in where they live or can't social distance at all. We're also supporting an Alabama hunger strike and a work stoppage that's been going on all the month of January. So that'll go a couple more days. And we're doing a fundraiser on their behalf since they've asked us to. And part of that is with the Free Alabama movement. So you can check out the Fight Toxic Prisons website for more information on how to donate and also to see their demands. They're producing a lot of content and have actually been able to send us videos from inside showing just what kind of conditions they're dealing with. I mean, they're literally having to burn their supplies to stay warm because they don't have any temperature control in the middle of winter. So they're having to build fires in the middle of these dorms so they don't freeze to death. So even after this is done, they're going to need that financial support for any kind of retaliation that they get. And they've already had a lot. They had a lot of retaliation like 3 days in. So after all of it's done, we expect them to continue needing a ton of our support. And then in Kentucky, we're actually working on a couple things here locally. We're about to kind of launch a more public campaign, hopefully, on getting Bashir to pass mass clemency statewide. Hopefully he will understand that he can be the good guy if he helps with this. And if not, we're just going to be a bigger pain. But he has the power to make an executive order to release a ton of populations, whether it be the elderly or people with pre-existing conditions. There's a lot of people he could let out basically with a wave of his pen, and we need him to do that no matter what kind of pressure he's under or how he feels about it, because he's sentencing people to death by not taking action. So we are going to continue insisting that he do something with the power that he has. And some of us here, including BLM Louisville and some of the various bail funds around the nation, are now working on the Diamonds Ford case, which is especially interesting because Diamonds Ford is a woman who basically went through almost exactly what Breonna Taylor went through, except she lived to tell her story. And so she's currently being held in, I believe it's in Jacksonville. She's being held in a Florida jail on an over $500,000 bond for attempted murder of an officer. And what happened that night is that these officers came into her house with a no-knock warrant. She had no idea who they were, and so she started firing her weapon to protect herself. She then retreated to the bathroom and called the police. And so we have a recording of her asking for police assistance to help because someone is breaking into her home and she's afraid they're going to kill her. And as soon as she realized that it was in fact the police breaking in, she surrendered herself, and her fiance have been held for several months now. So there's now a nationwide coalition to, one, get her home to her family so that she can fight this case from the safety of her home and not catch COVID. And also to start working on more comprehensive anti-no-knock legislation in Florida. Technically, there's already a ban on no-knocks in Florida, but that's not actually put into practice. Another weird thing about her case, and something that is not surprising to any of us, is that Florida is a stand your ground state, but that law is only benefiting white folks there. If a white person had done the same thing, they would have already been released so that they could get legal assistance and do all of this from home. But because she's a Black woman, they're assuming the worst and treating her as if she attempted to murder someone in cold blood for no reason. And so they're holding her. So yeah, that's my giant list of things happening.
And that's a lot to hold, Robin. And, I'm sure everyone's thankful for the work of White Toxic Prisons and how much of a collective effort it takes to get folks free. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying about the Capitol, how we're seeing people who, made a present threat against government officials on federal property, and how they are just going back home. There's videos and photos circulating, and there are journalists who have combed over thousands of hours worth of parlor videos in order to highlight what happened that day. And we're seeing these people released on their own recognizance. We're seeing these people have attainable bail set. We're seeing even beyond the Capitol riots with Kyle Rittenhouse, when he was engaging that crowd in out of state, and he was underage, and now he's home and hanging out in, first of all, you're not old enough to be in the bar, but you're hanging out in bars with noted white supremacists throwing up a white power sign, and you have no gauge of reality because the justice system has told you that your skin color has automatically justified your actions in that moment. We're not seeing that same courtesy extended to Black and brown people in the justice system. So the imbalance is evident. And as we're talking about imbalance, definitely want to hear from Ebony. Ebony, I know you talked a little earlier about the several months that you spent inside of the jail and how you had to wait for a public defender and wait for your bail and your bond to be posted. Can you talk about what life looks like for you now and how you're engaging some of the services that we have and what freedom looks like for you going forward?
Okay, well, it's still, because of coronavirus, everything is still slow. Everything, like we say, stay inside. Everything is still the same as when I was in jail. But being out, it's more of just trying to get my life, my kids and my children back better with my family, my sister. I'm trying to get back where I'm supposed to be. As a mother, as a sister, and as a daughter, I'm trying to do the right thing. It's weird because it's like every day it's something new going on in the world. It's like pushing to where you have to, I don't want to say break my neck, but you have to stand. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So I 100%, I stand. Your daughters, I've been there, and I'm gonna continue to do that. But if don't nothing change, it's gonna keep on happening. Same thing is gonna keep on happening. I said, okay, so they want to do a bond reduction. The coronavirus had happened, so they kept pushing my court dates back. And that's weird. Like it's scary because you don't know what's going on. It's like, see if you can get your bond lower. Bell's bonds, I knew that if I got my bond lowered to $5,000, I said Bell bonds was gonna help me. I knew that was gonna help me. $50,000 is a lot of money for 8 months. I didn't get it reduced. It's like they forgot about me because I didn't have a family. I didn't have people out there breaking their neck to, I mean, my family's there. Don't get it twisted. They are there. They're awesome. but as in like for someone who in the community, I was homeless, um, and I was working with Wellsprings. Uh, everybody who's homeless is not just out here on just drugs and hurting and harming. People is really it's hard to social distance when you're homeless. It's really hard to social distance when you're homeless. It's hard to social distance when you don't know where your next meal is coming from. I mean, and in the city of Louisville, Kentucky, there's so many resources and there's so many people and things out there to help you. Uh, you just got to go get it. You have to go get it. You have to. It's hard though. Oops, sorry. I'm sorry. Uh,
No, you're fine.
it was just a lot of stuff that was going on when you were saying about the jail, with people putting a person with coronavirus in the same jail, in the same room. It was like they had a woman that was they'll put the people who have coronavirus in what do you call it?
Solitary?
The hole.
Yeah.
There it goes. They put
Yeah.
me in solitary. I was in solitary for 2 weeks because they had nowhere to put me. They had nowhere to put me. I did not get into any trouble. They put me in solitary and told me that I was in solitary for a mental health hold. The whole 8 months I was there, the Lord was my mentor. I was nothing but God. That's it. But it was weird because they broke their neck to make it seem like that I was not pushing out. We call your public defender every day. They give somebody a public defender. I feel like that the public defender should reach out. Like my public defender, she just stopped. She didn't stop. I would have to call her. She would not reach out to me. My sister, she stays in Myrtle Beach, and she was calling all the way from Myrtle Beach to try to figure out what was going on. That's weird, and it's scary.
I have a question for you, Ebony. You mentioned while you were in there this summer, keeping up with what was happening with the Breonna Taylor case and the protests and things like that. Do you feel like that was creating tension with the prison staff, like with all of the correctional
100%, I
officers?
do agree. We had officers coming in, and because the males destroyed, like the male dorm, they were going all off, like throwing garbage cans. They took the ice bucket because like we couldn't have ice. They didn't give us water. They didn't want to give us the tea dog. You get hot water certain amounts of time. They didn't want to give us that because they were afraid that, like, one of the workers that is working $1 every 3 days. It's slavery. It's slavery. It's modern day slavery. That's what it is. That's why I don't understand why these young men out here can't wait to go to jail just to sit. You're a slave. I wish they had more education and understand that you're a slave. You like jail. That's not cool. It's not cool at all.
That's what gets me about the whole private prison debate. These are state prisons doing the same thing. Ultimately, it doesn't matter who's running the prison. A private company can own a prison that the state runs. They're all still using slave labor. So at the end of the day,
most definitely,
all of these prisons are just as bad.
Little Metro Department of Corrections also $2 a week to clean them. It's just not right. It's just a lot of stuff that can be done. And this is what I said. I said, why don't y'all put us to work? Like, it's so much. I'm certified in construction, and I'm in this jail, and I'm watching. Why don't y'all put us to work or something? You know what I'm saying? Give us something to do. It's all of this stuff in here that can be done. And instead of us, y'all trying to $1 a day for our commissary or whatever it may be, can I work my way out of this jail? Can I work my way out? I'm just trying to speak. What can I do? It's because if my parents is not going every Monday. My family's not going every Monday. They don't want me to be in jail, so they're not going to make sure I'm comfortable in jail. Commissary every Monday. Oh, $90 bag. Mom, you better do you some hair, paint a picture, sing a song. You getting out of there though. You're not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to make it comfortable for you to be in there. I learned a lot, and I believe that me sitting down. I don't believe that I should have sat down that long, but it did humble me, and it taught me a lot. It taught me a whole lot, and that's why I have a voice now, and I'm gonna speak. They were putting pregnant
Absolutely, and
women
you should.
inside of the hole. Like they would put the pregnant women inside of the hole with the same. I'm like, that's not 6 feet. She's pregnant. You put her in solitary because you don't want her to get coronavirus. Why don't you just release this girl? It's really weird. Like we couldn't get water. The officers was coming in being smart with us and stuff. Like, y'all watching the news? Nah, I don't feel like doing this today. Trays and stuff. I didn't trust food. Because the men do the food. In Louisville Metro Departments, the men do the food. The men do the food. I don't trust that. I don't trust that. I don't. Man, I don't trust none of it. No. I don't understand why the women can't do it. I don't understand. This makes sense. Put us to work. Give us something to do while we're in there. Let us speak to other kids and stuff too. They don't have to be in there. Let us scare straight. That's true. Like, I remember being in a program, Project Now program, when I was in middle school at Cameron Middle School. And they took us to Louisville Metro Department of Corrections just to show us what it was like and what was going on. And during the tour, my big cousin so happened to be in the jail. I broke down. Now, man, I'm 13 years old. I see my big cousin in this jail for his tour, and I broke down. And one of the men in the jail was like, "You don't do that. You keep your head up." My cousin's standing next to the dude who's speaking because he's looking at me like he's embarrassed. You know, my little cousin sitting here watching me, and it's like scared straight. And whew, that gave me chills. It's just really weird. Like that man was trying to tell me, keep your head up, do the right thing. You know, he's all right. You just keep. I broke down in that jail at 13 years old, and I'm 31 now. And
I think you're on mute.
sorry.
There you go.
I honestly feel like the reason why my case got looked at after all that time was because of what happened to Breonna Taylor, and I feel like that's bogus.
Yeah, and that's a good point. How these agents of the state are acting inside of their role, and how that has called attention to some of the work that we do. I know that for LCBF, one of the things that we are working hard on is the website. And Rebecca, if you could just take a couple of minutes to touch on what that is looking like and why communities should even be bothered with or excited about a website and an app for LCBF, and what that means for the community members that we work with and serve.
Absolutely. So we're doing two big sort of website tech moves. One is that we have a huge database of folks that have called into our hotline, folks we failed out. We do a lot of tracking of things.
Parenting. Been there.
Here, be quiet. Okay, so we're moving this big database that we have into a new home that's very secure, and it will allow our layout to be easier for us to maneuver, so that we're able to service folks faster and better and more efficiently, and it allows us to sort of streamline our process better. And in that, we'll also eventually have a website for folks to easily be able to plug into our work and know when we're going to have events coming up and know what news we've got coming. We'll be able to share sort of fight toxic prison stuff and things like that, so folks can get deeper involved in this abolition movement, and not just sort of what we're doing, but what's happening in a bigger, broader scheme of things. And we'll also be having places for folks to find resources about Abolition 101 and sort of what the terminology even is, and what reading lists are and things like that, so that folks can really dive into what this work looks like and how it impacts our daily lives, right? Like, when we break down what the carceral state is, and we break down what punishment culture is, and we break down what all of these systems are based on and rooted on, it's very, very ingrained, especially for white folks. It's very ingrained in our daily lives, and sort of I think we're going to start creating some spaces for folks to have access to those resources, and I think that's exciting for everybody. I hope everybody's excited about it at least.
It's definitely exciting, and I love how you framed it. Also, I know that some of our other team members, they've talked about what supporting Louisville Community Bail Fund looks like, and so one of the things that stuck out to me the most, and I'm sure Kanisha can talk about support for LCBF and how to join the team and support the work that we're doing. But one of the things that stuck out to me the most was a call to action for white people and to look at it as reparations work, not just throwing money at something and not engaging it any further, but actually becoming involved and examining and questioning and wrestling with your politics as it relates to prison and how the prison industrial complex kind of manifests itself in our daily lives. Kanisha, I'm gonna let you bring it on home. You're a member of the support team, gang. So if you can let folks know, like, what does LCBF need, and what do those needs look like for folks who are wanting to get connected to support the work that we're doing to help folks get free and stay free?
Yeah, so basically, Louisville Community Bail Fund, one of the biggest pieces of it is community. We truly function based off of community, whether that's local community or out of state. Community is community. So, and I know a lot of people have been seeing just people asking, like, what can I do to help? How can I stay involved? If we're not down in Justice Square, what more can I do? And that's what we're here for. There are so many pieces of us that it's needed to use and utilize to make this work move. There's so much that you can do. It could be someone that's able to not regularly, but every once in a while, drop off groceries or toiletries to a family. You can help with support work like myself and Jess does, where we literally just like invest in the people that we have bailed out and just complete that community and help them move to the next step. You can help with Rebecca doing more data work. And if you have a couple of hours every day to sit in front of a computer and invest that time, there is literally nothing. If you have an hour, 1 hour out of a week, there is a need for you here. And the only way we can make this work is if we keep it in our community. You don't have to be in Louisville. You don't have to be in Kentucky. You don't have to be in the United States of America. You just have to be able to be in front of a computer or some type of format to get in there and plug some stuff in, because the stuff that we're able to do, it is life changing, but it takes all of us to continue to do it. So if you are interested or want to know more, or you just want to, like, okay, I got an hour, what can I do? You can reach us on Facebook, LCBF. You can get us through Instagram, I think. And then we have a phone number. I don't know the number. 509. What was it?
509.
2357.
There it is. 509-2357. And just call us and let us know, hey, I got an hour. She said she needs an hour. I got an hour. What can I do? There is literally something you can do 1 hour a week and make this community rock out and bang. And that's what we need. Bang. Gang, gang.
Gang, gang.
I love that, Kanisha. LCBF really is a family, and we really are a community of people. So, like Kanisha said, whatever capacity that you have, we have something for you. If it's on your heart to deliver groceries, we absolutely have people where meeting their basic needs is going to contribute to that anti-recidivism. We have, if you are really good on the phone and you're good at asking clarifying questions for people, you can do the hotline. If you don't want to talk to anybody and all you want to do is sit in front of the computer and look at numbers, you can absolutely get connected to our data team. But there is work for you, and there is always a way for you to get involved. You don't have to necessarily be on the front lines snatching folks out of the jail and putting them in your car and getting them gone and and we are responsible and principled with these donations, and every dollar counts. I always encourage people when there are calls to action involving a financial donation to make sure that you at least donate a dollar and to challenge 5 friends. My goodness, ain't the devil busy? Challenge 5 friends to also donate a dollar. And we stretch those dollars, y'all. We are caregivers inside of our community. So we know how to make $1 look like 10 and how to make 10 look like 50. Now, instead of us having to stretch and have some of our community members go without, that $1 and you challenging or charging your friends to match those dollars is going to help our community members stay out of the criminal justice system and to not engage in some risky activities that would cause them to re-engage with the justice system. So wherever you're at in your study of abolition or even your curiosity about abolition, we have room for you. You don't have to be able to recite Asada and Angela off of the top of your head. We can build out and we can get you there. But if you've been waiting on a call to action and you've been waiting on knowing what to do, that time is now. I'm gonna leave y'all with Asada Shakur. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And Asada wrote that while she was in prison awaiting federal charges. She still had a love letter to Black people. So that's our love letter to y'all. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks for facilitating.
Mom, look at your lip.